Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Melody Barnes, and I'm Vice Provost for Global Student Leadership at New York University. And it is such a pleasure to have you here, and I want to welcome you on behalf of the NYU Abu Dhabi Institute. I was just saying to a group that's gathered here this evening that we do indeed live in interesting times. The challenges that face us in our communities and globally are constant. They are ever present. We look at hunger, poverty, financial insecurity, financial concerns that wrap themselves around the globe, and when they affect one community, they affect us all. These are challenges that don't know borders. And our economies are intertwined, and so closely intertwined that we know that one problem hits one country, it quickly moves to another, the contagion that we often all hear about. At the same time, we see an embrace of diversity around the globe. But old, ancient, long-standing conflicts continue to fester, and new ones start to emerge. And all of that is happening in the age of technology and the rapid transfer of information. So we constantly hear about these issues. We're constantly confronted with these problems. What we need is a new kind of leadership. What this all demands is a new kind of leadership. Leadership that's inclusive, leadership that's empowering, leadership that's ethical. Leadership that knows how to work across boundaries, whether they be race or ethnicity, language, political ideology, culture, all the things that seem to separate us, or possibly at times can bring us together. And it's that theme, leadership across boundaries, that brings us here tonight. And it's that theme that also has brought us here to Abu Dhabi from around the globe, and a leadership summit that has invited 35 extraordinary young people from NYU to participate in a weekend-long conversation that's part of a larger year-long conversation that the NYU Leadership Initiative has started across our global campuses. The question that we're asking is, how can we support and nurture this new kind of leadership among young people who are equipped to go out and have a profound effect on all of our communities in countries around the world? This evening is the culmination of the weekend that we've been having. It's been an exciting and exhausting weekend. But before we leave, we want to come and share that conversation with you, with a broader community, and to talk about leadership across boundaries and what's necessary to prepare a next generation for that kind of leadership. And for that reason, we're excited to have this really fantastic panel of leaders from around the world who represent that next generation of leadership. Moderating tonight's panel, we have Kate Otto. And I have to say personally that I am very excited and very proud of Kate and excited about what she has been doing. Kate is an NYU alumna. She's a graduate of the College of Arts and Sciences, as well as the Wagner School of Public Service. And she's been doing extraordinary work since she left NYU. She started Everyday Ambassador, which focuses on, not surprisingly, the issue of 21st global leadership. And she's also the author of a book by the same title. And for me, probably twice Kate's age, I already feel like an underachiever. She's an author, she's an NYU grad, and very excited to say that Kate has been accepted into NYU's School of Medicine and will be starting there in the fall. At the same time, she's also been serving as a global health consultant, working with the World Bank, USAID, and in a range of countries around the world. As you can see, Kate is profoundly equipped to moderate tonight's conversation and I'm going to turn it over to her and let her introduce the rest of this fantastic panel. So thank you for being here, welcome, and I hope you enjoy tonight's panel.
Thank you very much, Melody. Welcome, everybody. And I do want to say, as an alumna of NYU, it's been a true privilege to spend this time with you, the 35 students who have been here for this summit. And I'm really excited to have a broader audience here tonight to hear from our very distinguished panel. So, as Melody said, 21st century with different circumstances and different ways that we interact with each other calls for a very different kind of leadership. And we're very lucky to have 3 individuals from 3 very different sectors and different fields who all represent this new form of leadership. So I want to briefly introduce our panel, then I'm going to let them introduce themselves in a little bit more detail. But we have Butheina Kazim, who is a Fulbright Scholar of Media, Culture, and Communication at NYU. We have David Sengeh, who's a PhD candidate at Massachusetts Institute of Technology Media Lab in the lab's biomechatronics group. And he's going to tell you about some fascinating work he does designing prosthetics, as well as working with youth all over the world to get them to be just as innovative and creative with problem solving. And we also have Noura Alturki, who leads human resources and corporate social responsibility for Nesma Holding, which is a Saudi-owned company in Jeddah. So we have media, culture, communication, we have science, engineering, technology, we have industry, commerce, private sector. So we really have people from across the world, from across sectors here. And I want to start by asking our panel to each share a little bit about what is the industry you work in, and what does leadership traditionally look like, or what has it looked like for the past 10, 15, 20 years or longer? And what would you like to change about that status quo, or what do you think you're changing about that status quo? Why don't we start with Butheina?
Thank you for the introduction, Kate. It's really, I work in the media, and I traditionally worked in the traditional sort of media industry, mainly television. And the traditional roles are either that you are the CEO of the television network, or on the editorial side, the directors, producers, and content creators are really, or the on-screen personalities, which are sort of the most publicly known leadership roles in that industry.
Okay. And how do you see change happening in that field and a new kind of leadership emerging?
I think it's a change that is in sync with the rest of the industry, as it changes now, given the rapid development of digital technology, social media, sort of becoming a key driver, of content generation, and a key sort of factor that is integrated into traditional media. That is really changing the sort of power structure, specifically editorially, in terms of news coverage, in terms of storytelling, in terms of perspectives that are given. And I think that's a very positive change, because it allows more people to be heard, allows more voices, and allows for more stories and perspectives to be shared. So I think that the leadership, the traditional leadership structure is being challenged by the development of technology.
Excellent. And David, how about in the field of science research, biomechatronics?
Well, I think actually in academia in general, you feel like a leader is your professor in some way. A leader is the PhD student who knows. There are 2 kinds of people. Ones who feel like they know everything, which is why they're doing it, or those who feel like they don't know anything and hence want to learn. But I think where we are heading towards is more that the leader, the person who's making the most progress, the person who's solving the problems, are usually people who can collaborate, people who can bring together a different set of ideas and a different set of skill sets from various industries and various expertise. So in biomechatronics specifically, my work uses medical imaging and modeling and computer-aided design and 3D printing. You're not going to be an expert at all of those things. And so you have to be able to understand how to interact and collaborate with people from those different industries. So I think it really becomes, how do you not be the person who knows and does it all, but how, as a leader, do you bring together people who have the skills and who know a lot more than you know?
Yeah, the connector.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. And Noura, how about private sector?
I mean, coming from the private sector, and especially in commerce and industry, it's clear that the traditional idea of a leader is by your job title, right? The person, generally older, generally male, at the head of the hierarchy, who's controlling the money and controlling the power. And today, that's definitely changing. That concept of leadership is changing. There are a lot more younger faces, much more diversified, but also companies in general, I think, have realized that in order to stay at the forefront, and in order to compete, and in order to innovate, you need to have buy-in. And you need to allow more voices to be heard and have a different leadership style. So I think what's changing now is the dimensions around who is a leader and what kind of a leader should you be. Should you be authoritative? Should you be a dictator? Should you be the one decision maker? Or should you allow for more voices to be heard? Should you be open to other opinions that are different from your own?
So there's actually a lot in common between everyone's in some way. And basically being able to connect with a lot of different people rather than being the one influencer, the one powerful person, being the person who's able to connect everyone. So it sounds like a great idea, but how has it been? If there are there obstacles to that? Have you encountered them yourself in your work? And feel free to anyone just jump in on that.
It's interesting, this concept of us speaking about leadership. When we first got invited to speak, at least me personally, I was first asked, am I being invited to speak because you have considered me a leader, or because what exactly? And they said, no, it's because, we see that leadership is something that is exercised regardless of your position and regardless of your location. And so from that perspective, not me being a leader, but me being in a position where I have some authority and interact with other leaders, I would say that one thing regarding leadership is just the term itself is very daunting. When you say that I am a leader or I want to be a leader, automatically some obstacles come in there because of maybe self-doubt or others judging you or others, whatever it may be. And I think that the first thing about leadership is just not to think about it too much and to just follow your heart and make the decisions that you feel are right. And just leave the labels to other people, because someone said that what is the definition of a leader? The leader is not judged by you being told you're a leader, but by having followers. And so if you are someone that is respected, someone that people listen to, then by default you become a leader.
Whether or not you have the title, whether or not you have a certain
Absolutely.
office. Yeah.
I actually had a similar reaction to Noura when I heard about the summit, and I think the thing that sort of shifted my perspective on it was the fact that there is a very fresh approach that NYU is taking with this leadership summit, in that it's questioning traditional sort of models of leadership, and it's inviting people to think more about what it means to be a leader in this changing environment, and what does that mean for different types of leadership, different types of individuals actually assuming leadership roles that you would traditionally not expect them to fulfill. And I had previously sort of been kind of allergic to the term leadership, and I've always sort of questioned it. And one of on a blog post I wrote in 2012, there was a report put out by the Arabian Business magazine that lists 100 powerful Arab women. And I created sort of my own version, my own take on that, and circulated it across sort of all my platforms. And I got a very strong reaction as to sort of my questioning of what it means to be a powerful Arab woman. What does it mean? What are the concepts of power that are at play? And most of the list listed in Arabian Business was of CEOs, and sort of power linked to sort of economic factors, or even sort of traditional business structure. And for me, power sort of meant a broader spectrum, and leadership in different industries and aspects of life were also equally worthy of recognition. And I felt like it was important to have that alternative. So,
were there any qualities in particular you looked for when you were seeking out who was going to be on your list?
I think it was primarily sort of challenging sort of the kind of activities that people were involved in, sort of industries, and broadening the criteria. So, you know, the list listed 100 names from across academia. I listed activists, cartoonists, photographers, artists, singers, all kinds of different sort of disciplines that aren't necessarily attributed directly to leadership. They're attributed to fame or celebrity status, but not necessarily leadership. You know, as well as sort of activists and sort of grassroots active citizens. They're not traditionally sort of listed in these power lists and power formulas. So,
right. But like Noura said, if someone has followers, then they are a leader, even if they're not going to be listed on the.
For me, I was more fascinated with the idea of somebody following their own heart and being their own follower, and that to me was enough of a criteria of being a leader with a cause.
I want to go back to that when I let David jump in if you have any thoughts.
I think to be the leader who brings together people might seem like it's easy, but it actually is hard. And most of that challenge comes from within. To be able to reach out to somebody for help, you have to acknowledge to yourself that you don't know everything. You have to be humble enough to say, look, I have a general idea about this stuff, but I don't really know. So that humility actually is expensive for a lot of people because it's like putting yourself out there. And unless you don't just do it, you have to practice it. You have to be willing to ask for help and accept help. You have to be willing to offer help at the same time. Because at the end of the day, you also want to contribute. You want to add value to this relationship. It's a relationship thing. It's not that you at the same time people bring all their knowledge and you use it for your own good. But you are also adding value, right? So it is hard. And it is not something you just wake up and want to do one day. You have to practice with your roommates at first, and then slowly expand that circle.
So for you, and whether it's been your work in the lab or your work outside of the lab, were there any kind of specific experiences that challenged you at first that made you realize that, or was it gradual over time? Anything that comes to mind?
It happens every day, right? So I work with this gentleman who's in the Netherlands. He knows finite element modeling way more than I could ever know. And just reaching out to him was instrumental for the work that I do, because I need somebody who knows that level of detail on something that's absolutely important and necessary for my work, to be able to do it. So it happens every day. I have to reach out. Was it hard at first
to do that? Were you nervous? Were you?
No, not really, because I think you have to. I don't take myself too seriously, so if you have to be willing to not take yourself too seriously and know that you're being honest and you're humble. Like if he said no, what am I going to do?
That's fine, right? The worst that someone's going to say is no.
Right.
Yeah. Good.
But then you can always ask again if you want to say no. Ask him once he cannot say no.
Absolutely. Which comes from, like what Butheina was saying, the source within yourself of having a cause and having something that you believe in. So what have been, in your opinion, I'm sure there are many qualities that it requires. You just mentioned one, that's humility, that's key. What are some other things that you find yourself calling upon or having had to develop that maybe you didn't have when you started out doing this work, that have developed as you've tried to bring people together to unite around a cause, to unite around an issue? In particular, ones that might have been difficult for you to create.
One thing that I realized once I became head of my division in human resources and social responsibility is that not everyone comes into a position of leadership or a position of power with the right skills to communicate and to create buy-in and to get consensus around issues. And so for me, it had to be about knowing when the right time is to be soft and when it's the right time to be hard, when I should be giving feedback to someone because their behavior or their attitude is negative or destructive, and when I should let things run their course.
Sure.
And I think that accepting that sometimes people won't like what you say and that you won't always be liked is something that's important for the job and to get the task done. And that as a leader or as someone who has an idea that you want to follow, when you want to follow your heart, you don't follow it by responding to every single attack or criticism or feedback that you get. That you have to stay on target, channel in the ideas that you've gotten from around you, but then really go with your gut on what makes sense. And I think the other thing is to celebrate along the way. A lot of the times when you have a leadership objective in mind or where you want to reach a goal, you always, maybe some people are not satisfied until you get to the final end. But what I've noticed is that every time you move forward, or at least when I move forward, I find another thing that I want to achieve, and so that you always have to just stop for a bit and reflect on what it is that you have achieved and celebrate that and celebrate the team around you.
Yeah, knowing when it's enough and you can acknowledge and celebrate having done enough. And
I wonder if there's ever going to be enough. It's not about that. I think it's just about if you're ambitious, you might never find that anything is enough.
Right.
But every time that you've achieved a milestone or something, I think it is important to take a moment to acknowledge the people around you who have helped you to develop that. And it's a way to motivate and get them to also come in with you for the next step.
Sure. So going back to your first point about communication, it's really understanding how to communicate.
In my
to people
opinion,
around you.
leadership is all about communication.
Yeah. And Butheina, I'm sure that's a huge part of your world as well.
It was, and I think it was a huge learning curve for me. The moment, or the period that I decided that I was told actually to be more human, and that was something that was a huge realization for me, because I had a certain idea, especially because I went into sort of the media industry with a certain sense of having to prove myself, because I was very young and tasked with a really big project, which was launching a television channel. And I was very passionate about that, and there were sort of really human elements to it. It was a channel that was focused on arts and culture and was supposed to share documentaries and independent films and world cinema across pan-Arab televisions. And it was a really exciting project with a really strong human element, but in my mind, in order to make it happen, I had to be very sort of almost robotic, very traditional in my understanding of how to get it done. When I realized that tapping into connecting with people and tapping into their passions and to sort of have a certain sense of shared vision that you share with the people you work with, you allow them the opportunity to express themselves and share sort of those ideas, and to have a piece of their opinion and their creative input and their vision in what you're all coming together to do, is where you can really harness sort of the power of creativity.
Yeah, and we've talked about that a little bit in the past 24 hours or so. The idea not only of what you're communicating to others, but how to handle hearing back from people who you're working with, whether it's people who you consider followers who you're a leader of, or who are your teammates, the people who you're aiming to serve, perhaps, if it's service-oriented. So there are certain qualities that are required to speak and to share with others, but what about the idea of being able to listen to others, and the difference between, as we've talked about, trying to bring people together around a cause versus purely just trying to persuade someone of something, which might not be the best course.
Well, I was going to say the element of celebrating every stage. I hadn't linked it to video games or games in general. In games, you celebrate every level. You get points on the way, and your character does something fancy, and you yourself are happy about it, and you finish level 1, and you pat yourself on the back, and it's great, right? And you continue to do that. Like that's you continue doing it. You're not just getting frustrated because you can't go to level 25. You know you will get to level 25. You will fail on level 5 so many times, but it builds up. You get all this joy through that process. So it was a good realization, I suppose.
Yeah.
But with your point about silence, it's really even more important now than I think it has been in the past. If we take our lives, there's a text message that goes up, there's a tweet ringtone, there's your phone that's ringing, there's 20 emails that are you have your listservs on these, the preset that you have to do. There's so much chaos in our lives. There's so much chaos in our minds. There's so much chaos at home. There's no place, even when you're praying and your phone is on vibrate, your phone vibrates. And that you're never silent. So it's really important to be able to practice to be silent and listen. And the only time you can be silent is when you're listening, generally, if you take all these elements away, right? So it's absolutely important, not just as a leader, but as humans, as individuals. If we're going to be human, we probably have to be a lot more silent and listen.
Right, which is technically the opposite of what the image of leadership traditionally is. Usually it's the person sharing and talking all the time as opposed to the person sitting and listening. Along those lines, we have kind of discussed and defined the idea of a leader as someone who naturally has followers, but one definition I love to use is a leader is someone who, rather than creating followers, creates more leaders. And so I'm curious if that is something that happens in your work, whether it's with the training center, whether it's with social media, whether it's with Innovate Salon and Innovate Challenges, if you could reference maybe specifically some of the work that you do creating more leaders.
Just before I came on this talk, my father called me and he said, "What are you going to be talking about?" And I said, "Leadership." And he said, "Oh, you should just tell them that your father is the best leader you know." And I think he's watching online, so if he is,
Hi, Dad.
I said it. But no, one of the things that I realized when I joined the family business, because I work in my family company, is that I had a strong resistance to working in business, especially because my background at Brown was on environmental studies, and it was very anti-corporation, everything that isn't hippie and peace-loving and all of that. And what I realized when I came in is that a lot of the job, a lot of what happens in business is mentoring, is creating the second generation of leaders, is succession planning. And especially today, and especially in the Arab world, I would say, this question of lack of talent and a shortage of qualified resources makes it so that successful companies are those that invest in their people. So we always, this is not just something that we say, but it's actually our only choice, is we have to hire for attitude and train the skill. And so everything that we do in our daily lives at work is giving people feedback, telling them what they've done right and what they've done wrong, and celebrating and directing and giving training and putting them on the right path. And so for me, my definition, especially because this is my family business, is my aim was never to become head of a division or to run that operation. My aim is to find out who in my team could be that person and then work with them day in, day out so that they can take over that spot. And the moment I find that I'm in an organization or in a place where there isn't that next person who could become a leader, that's when we start to panic. Right?
Sure, or you're not doing your job correctly.
Absolutely. And I think that there's a model that I heard about, I think it's at Unilever, where every person, before they get promoted, in order to get that promotion, needs to identify a successor. So that kind of concept, I think, rings true for what leadership should be. It's about moving up, but also moving someone up with you.
Yeah, and I can see how that would apply to fields far beyond
Absolutely.
the corporate world as well.
I think for me, it was really just trying to get every opportunity that I can to speak to people who are sort of working within the same industry, especially students. That was for me a huge sort of passion, especially when I started to create my own content. Both when I made my first documentary, and then when I started working sort of more actively and more sort of seriously within the social media world, because I was very interested in this idea that you, as a media sort of both student but also enthusiast, or somebody with a story to tell or perspective to share, have the tools at your disposal to do that, to do just that, to be able to capture sort of your world and to be able to capture your story, and then at your own accord become a leader in the same way that sort of I defined it, as sort of an owner of content that you produce or you believe in or you sort of want to communicate. So it was really sharing sort of the story of, of the production sort of cycle, of the motivation behind it, of, of the different challenges that we experience sort of throughout the production process, and sort of how people can actually make that decision and do that for their own, on their own sort of terms.
Yeah, and can you actually just tell us a little bit more? So Butheina produced a film, a documentary called Letters to Palestine, which is an amazing documentary, so everyone should Google that and watch that when they get home. But there's actually really many powerful things I found in it, but one that stuck out to me was somebody in the film. Why don't you explain generally what the film is about first? I'm going to let you know.
Yeah, it was a film that I produced sort of side by side. So I was working in the corporate sort of television world at that time, and I was working in sort of the strategy, business development side of things, and I was starting to get sort of disillusioned by, the heavy sort of entertainment side of things by virtue of the channels that I was working on, and I was involved with an organization called Ziyara that organized trips to all over Palestine for people, Arabs who have sort of passports that allow them to enter. And for me, a big frustration was sort of, sharing the perspectives of people. There's a strong sort of solidarity movement within the Arab world or within the Arab community with the Palestinian cause, and I felt like there was a frustration in not being able to communicate that. And I remember the sentence that sort of struck me to do it was the founder of Ziyara, a lady called Sana Dabagh, saying that we can't believe that there are Arabs out there who haven't forgotten about us. It's usually just people from the West or people who have lived in the West that come here to visit us. So for me, that was a mind-blowing sort of perspective, because I had grown up in a place where it was a very alive sort of subject matter. And so I decided, I work in television, I have sort of access to the equipment, and I didn't know as much as you're supposed to know, I guess, when you start producing a film, and decided to just do it. And, and at that point I had sort of harnessed my human side enough to appeal to as many people as I can to work with me on the project, and convinced a lot of people to devote their time to it. And we interviewed 15 different people with their perspective as to how they connect with Palestine and what it means to them, ranging from academics to art collectors to activists and different sort of voices that show different perspectives of solidarity, as opposed to a single sort of way of connecting to Palestine. And the film was literally had to literally be shown across borders. So I couldn't travel with the film, and it was shown all over Palestine through the Ziyara Initiative in 2010, and we would just Skype in and watch the different screenings and hear about it from over here. So so that was sort of an experience that really helped me understand why it was so important to share this story.
Right.
Because I wasn't in any way. I think David, we were talking about how the idea of being ready and of really, having all the tools, at your disposal to make it to the next level, to take the next step, and you never really do. It's a question of deciding and then trying to sort of learn as much as you can, as fast as you can, to get to the next thing that you want to do or achieve.
Absolutely, yeah, and many things stuck out at me about that film as someone who's not Arab watching it. But one was that, I'm not sure which of the 15 it was, one of these 15 people she interviewed said, it's an immense responsibility to be responsible for telling the story of someone when you haven't gone through that specific struggle. And I think as leaders, that's oftentimes a position that you're put in, where whether it's a cause you're representing or something that you're trying to achieve, you're asked to tell other people's stories, and they might not be your stories. And the sensitivity and the humanity that has to come with that, I think, is a very graceful thing and a very difficult thing to cultivate, but happens over time, and certainly happened in that film. David, do you want to talk about Innovate Salon at all?
Yeah. So when I'm not designing prosthesis, I am thinking about, one of the things I like thinking about is how do you get a generation of young people who can problem solve locally? And that pretty much what it did. But how do you have students, irrespective of where they are, especially if they don't feel like they have all the resources, to form teams, ask questions about the challenges that they face, not expect some external entity to help them, and then use that team to build and learn by making, learn through that process, work within a network with other young innovators across their community, and develop solutions to problems that are actually alive, problems that they have faced. And part of the reason for wanting to do this is, one, you need to have that self-efficacy. You need to learn through failure. You need to have started something. You need to build that confidence and the self-efficacy and the audacity to ask the big questions. One is not going to be a leader. One is not going to be a problem solver if you've not practiced it. In the same way, we don't become better CEOs or better leaders if we don't practice it. You have to practice problem solving. You have to practice being in tough situations. So Innovate Challenges is this initiative that we do in Sierra Leone, Kenya, and now Cape Town, and we're spreading across South Africa, and we'll go into other communities where we ask young people of all classes, of any background, to form teams, tell us what problem they want to solve, and in return, we give them resources like cash to develop prototypes. We give them a space for them to come and share the ideas with each other, give feedback to each other, learn from each other, and then the network, such that once they leave the camp, once they leave our facilities, they are able to call onto each other to ask questions about, hey, do you know how to build this? Do you know how to build this circuit so that I can have my project do X, right? So examples of stuff kids have done. One of the kids, Kelvin, collected trash to develop a radio station in his community, which he then uses to have other people from his community to tune into and participate and engage. And he did this when he was 15. One of the other students in Kenya, Tom and his team, they understand that indoor smoking is horrible. The morbidity and mortality from indoor smoke is actually pretty high. And instead of just talking about it, they decided that they wanted to make coal and charcoal that was smokeless, that was from waste. So they're both collecting trash and waste and making it into charcoal, and then bringing that charcoal back into homes to literally save lives. Now, they are not PhD students. They are 16, 17, 18-year-old kids who are in Sierra Leone, who are in Kenya, who are in South Africa, who have that ability, courage, and self-efficacy to solve problems. Because at the end of the day, if we have to change generations, wherever you are, and this is also in the United States, in communities where people expect that the government solves problems for them or some other entity solves problems for them, that is not sustainable. If we want to see a generation of young people, a generation of leaders who can tackle the challenges that we have not even seen yet, they have to be prepared to be problem solvers. And the only one of the major ways in which they can be problem solvers is by learning from doing, by actually taking the jump and by seeing what happens, right? Do your research a little bit, but you have to get your hands dirty. And so for me, in my research group specifically, my professor is a double amputee. He lost his legs when he was 17. And today he's a world-class professor at MIT who designs bionic ankles. But he did not start one day his first project was not a bionic ankle. Actually, he wanted to change his height because every time he goes on a date with a different lady, he wanted to be taller than the lady. And so he would change his height every day. he liked to climb, and he will make himself different legs, different feet, so that he can climb and still live the life that he wanted to live. Now, this is somebody who had the self-efficacy and the audacity to ask, how can I do this? How can I use whatever challenge there is that I know and solve a problem for that? And growing up in Sierra Leone and seeing that certainly Sierra Leone is dependent on large amounts of aid, and we all expect people to solve our problems generally. But also that there are amputees in Sierra Leone, and it's not that they're not able to be like my professor. They can't be like my professor. There's no difference between them and my professor. And what is missing is that self-efficacy, that ability to ask, that ability to do something. You don't buy that in a shop. You don't buy that. Somebody does not give it to you. You take it. Or we as individuals, we as children, kids who grow up, you have that curiosity. You have that risk-taking ability. You're learning by making things and breaking things. That's what kids do. And the question is, how do we maintain that, not just in kids, but in all of us? And how do we ensure that young people who make up significant proportions of our populations in Africa, in the MENA and Asia region, how do we become the problem solvers we need to be for there to be growth, right?
Right. And what, and maybe Noura has something to add to this too, but what is the pushback to that? Because clearly that sounds like the right thing to do, to empower, to make sure that people have the skill sets that they're doing and learning this, creating more leaders. But what has been, because this is similar to your work that you do at the training camp, which maybe you want to explain a little bit.
It's so interesting hearing you say that, because every time you say self-efficacy, I think of being proactive. And something that we lack in Saudi Arabia with such a large youth population is that I always feel that what we get in the US college education, which when you're in the US or when you're in college, you're thinking about who am I and what am I supposed to do in life, and there's a lot of self-reflection, and I feel that for some reason I still haven't figured out why, but I feel that process is missing. And I don't know if I can say the Arab world, but definitely in Saudi Arabia, that process of figuring out what it is that I want to do is missing. And perhaps we are still operating at a survival level of getting our basic needs met, housing and transportation and water and all of that stuff. I mean, what we face in Saudi Arabia is what we term at Nesma poverty of capabilities, which is the inability of people to take advantage of, with not having the right knowledge, know-how, skills, competencies to take advantage of the wealth of opportunities that exist in our country. And so what we're doing at the training center, which is one of our flagship community projects, is providing an opportunity for women and men to develop the skills they need to become more, well, not to be proactive, because they need to be proactive and actually come to our center, but to get the skills they need to then grow and to take charge of their own careers. And for the past 5 years, we've been providing courses in computer and English and soft skills. But recently, what I was thinking about was this idea of being proactive about coming alive, right? About just living every day with purpose and not just going to the office, coming back from the office, or going to the job placement center and coming back and saying, I haven't found a job and people haven't provided me with an opportunity yet. And what we've introduced into our process is, first of all, an application form to screen out those who really want to be here, because we provide it for free. So how can we make sure that the people who are here are the ones that want to be here, the ones that want to improve their skills, the ones that want to learn? And second, and we just finished this last week, which was really interesting, was doing job interviews. Well, not job interviews in order to give them a job, but job interviews in order to see whether they're going to pass to the next level of getting a place in our courses. And what was fun about it is that usually when you do a job interview, you're deciding whether or not to accept them. But what the challenges that I gave our team is that every single person needs to get something back from us. Even if they don't get a place in our English spot, you need to give them something. So when we were interviewing them, we were giving them feedback right after the interview about things they did that would otherwise not get them a job. So for example, one woman came in and she hadn't filled out her form. And I had told her, you have to fill out the form in order to come in. And then the other person asked her, what did she say? And she says, she told me I need to go get my form. And she went and she like made coffee, and I could see it all happening in front of my eyes.
Yeah.
And so then after I interviewed her, I told her, you know, I just need to give you feedback on your interview, because if you went to another job and asked to get hired, you wouldn't have gotten in. And she looked at me like that, and I said, I'm telling you because no one else is going to tell you. They're just going to tell you you didn't get accepted, and you're going to say, they're racist, you know, because she was, you know, dark or something. And I said, the reason why I wouldn't have offered you a job is because right in front of my face, you went, oof, and you went and you made coffee when I had asked you specifically to go get the papers. I have 5 minutes to judge you on whether or not you're going to get this job. So you need to take those 5 minutes more seriously. And she looked at me and she started laughing, and she says, oh my goodness, I didn't even think about it. And, you know, I thought about how I was going to act within the interview, but not before and after and all of that stuff. So what we're providing here is an opportunity, and this is the new wave of what we're looking at, is that there is a movement in the Arab world to go online with online courses and online education, and I think that that's really powerful. But the importance of human connections is really, really something that I think if we don't focus on it in the center, it will be lost.
Yeah.
And so what we're trying to create here is a hopeful and provocative space of people who are like-minded, who come together and share experiences and start to become inquisitive about what it is that I want to do and what is my purpose in life. And even though we're not a job placement center, we can connect with other you know, employers and job placement providers that can come in and give them that opportunity as well. But we're trying to create in these people that sense of proactiveness, that sense of living with purpose, that, you know, being a mother is a noble cause, and it is fine to be a full-time mother. But are you really giving your children all that you can give them if you're going to be a full-time mother? Really living your life with purpose for whatever vocation you choose or whatever sector, whether it's focusing on your family only or focusing on family and volunteer work or being an entrepreneur or being an employee. Whatever it is that you do, you know, live your life with purpose. And if I think I've taken a bit too much time, but I wanted to make one more point, which is that especially I think in the Arab world where unfortunately we're used to mediocrity, I think one thing that I've learned...
What do you mean by that?
The standards are a bit reduced in my opinion. I think that people don't necessarily give it their best because they're just, oh, people aren't really, you know, giving it all that they have, and we're just accepting a lesser standard than what we have and what is our potential.
Are lower?
I'm not sure why, but I think that, you know, there's a, like, for example, government bureaucracy and, you know, come and meet us tomorrow and come back tomorrow and, you know, and what I realized that for myself is that it is really fulfilling. I just had an experience in the last month where I approached a task with my full standard of how I think this task should be done. And I was faced with a reaction of someone being so thankful and grateful that I approached it in that way. And I hadn't even been so conscious of the fact that I had given it my all. I had just done it because that's what I do. But the reaction was, oh my goodness, we never work with people like this in Saudi Arabia. Thank you so much for giving it your all. And I realized that if I had reduced my standards, then I would constantly be living with a lower return than what I would have wanted. And then you don't have a right to complain, right? If you reduce your own standards, then you don't have any right to complain about the reduced standards elsewhere. And what I found was so fulfilling is that when I kept my standards high, but still was aware of what was out there, I was actually challenging people to come up to our level. And that's what happened. And I think that that's a very important message that I wanted to share, is that it all is from within yourself, and that you should never say, oh, well, this environment is mediocre, let me be mediocre. Because one day that person will come along or that opportunity will come along and you will no longer be at that level.
Right, right. And that actually, I was just thinking that earlier we were talking about the idea that each of you in very different ways do break stereotypes and how that can be funny sometimes as well. And I think that a lot of times people in a leadership position are ones who stand out a bit or break out or maybe are pioneers in a way. So I actually was wondering if we could talk a little bit about the idea of what you think people's expectations have been of you, sometimes from the way you look, from the way just where you're from, and how you feel like you've defied that in a way and how that defines your leadership in some way.
I mean, I was talking about this, having grown up here in Dubai and then sort of always lived in big cities. you kind of have to grapple with, your identity, or the question of who you are and your culture, and having to explain certain things very, very early on. Because, I mean, in the UAE, the UAE population, the UAE national population is about 20%, which makes it a minority population in the country. So while, I think there are more advantages to that than disadvantages in terms of your own personal growth, you do become very sort of aware and self-aware of sort of the expectations or the fears or the sort of the nuance, the lack of nuance sort of, and the importance of sort of reaching out and making yourself sort of extra available for sort of conversation and dialogue and understanding, because there is a certain sense or certain fear sort of either offending or not necessarily understanding what you're about or what is culturally acceptable. And I mean, the UAE is a very sort of tolerant space in terms of the existence of different cultures, but by virtue of it being sort of a new country, it's always been something that has actually been a recent question in terms of defining UAE identity and defining what it means to be Emirati, what it means to be from a sort of from a more macro level, what it means to be a Gulfi, which is a term that is becoming more and more popular, and then what it means to be an Arab, and then what it means to be a Muslim. And it was very interesting to see all of that kind of sort of melt into one, when you're in different spaces. And a lot of it has to do with sort of your own cognizance and your own sort of ownership of your own identity and the things that are associated with you. For me, I always think of my favorite quote by Sylvia Plath is there no way out of the mind? And once you get out of your own self and your own sort of hang-ups about your own identity and leading with that is when you have the opportunity to sort of just be, as cliche as it sounds, sort of borderless, and sort of your own person without having certain things attributed to you and you adopting them.
Right.
So you're no longer reacting, you're just being and being proactive. Yeah. If that makes sense.
It does. In your borderless comment, is something that's actually come up in conversations with a lot of the students, where sometimes that first acknowledgement of identity as a leader, identity as just a person, comes from when you leave your country, or when you leave and you're able to see where you came from in a different light, and people are seeing you in a different light when you're in a new place. So, thoughts, David and Noura? Similar experiences.
I mean, now and then is a very different feeling about my identity, but I arrived in the US from my college days 2 weeks before September 11th. And so all of a sudden, I was just so interesting to everyone. They wanted to know what it was like to be an Arab woman, what it was like to be a Muslim, what it was like to be a woman from Saudi Arabia, what it was like to be Saudi. And I think that for me, that was a very defining experience, part of my college experience, because I was then forced to re-examine every single element of my identity in order to then be able to explain it a lot more.
So when people were asking you things, you found yourself maybe not even able to answer it at first?
Yeah, they were helping me to go through it, right? I was trying to struggle. I was struggling with all of the different elements, and fortunately for me, I was in a place where I was foreign, and so this was an interesting experience because I was grappling with my own identity, but then every single other element of my personality was also there. So actually, a college friend of mine is in the audience, and she's teaching at NYU today, but we were part of the Muslim Student Association together, and we were both Muslim women, and we would spend a lot of time talking about what it was like to be a Muslim woman in that day and age. And my brother was also there with me in college, and I can pass for a lot of different nationalities, but he can't. Very, very Arab. And so his experience was a lot more uncomfortable than mine was, because he, of course, some paranoia comes into play. That was then, but now I don't even think about it too much, and I'm lucky that I have this one experience where I was discriminated against because I was a Saudi woman in the workforce. And I say I'm lucky because if I didn't have that one experience where I was asked to leave the office because I was an Arab, because I was a Saudi woman, I wouldn't have any way of connecting with the stories of discrimination that women do face. And so I can say, I know what it feels like, but you need to not let that idea define who you are. Because what happens is that when people face discrimination repeatedly, it's very difficult not to make it your identity. And so what I tell these women when they go through the thing is I challenge them to think about whether this is something that actually has happened to them or whether that it's something that they've imposed on themselves. Oh, you know, like for example, they won't let me in because I'm a woman. Are you sure that's true? Or did you not smile and therefore they treated you with hostility or with resistance?
Yeah.
And so I think that maybe part of the college experience, which we're fortunate to have, of all of us who have studied in the US, is this idea of coming to terms with your identity and being okay with it and letting that move with you, but then just not getting stuck in your own head, like Butheina said.
Yeah.
I was just taking notes because I'm learning from all the stuff you guys are saying. For me, my dad still expects that one day I'll wake up and I'll take this thing out of my head, because he does not. Where does this come from? But I'm not going to take it out. I like him a lot. I think I'm happy that I can walk into a place and people say, whatever goes into their minds can go into their minds. And then I'm happy to be who I am and be the engineer that I am, or be the person who gets to be lucky and be on stage with you all, or be the person who does what he does. I'm happy to be comfortable wearing my own clothes that I design rather than buying some other clothes that represent whatever it represents to somebody. Because people don't define me. You can't, as a leader, as somebody, I never think about myself as a leader, but as an individual, as a human, you can't be defined. It's this complex thing, because we all certainly are social animals, and we do care about the relationships we have. That's what relationships are. But it's about the moderation of how you let other people define you. Look, which happens when I'm in Sierra Leone, if you call me Rasta because you don't know me and you think, sure, I must just be some guy who's smoking weed, good for you. What am I going to do to you? I can't do anything to you. You say Rasta, I say Rasta, I give you a cheese bump. It's completely okay, and I'm happy with that. And if I go to an office where I have to speak to somebody and I say, I came to see whoever, and you're like, I'm not sure. And then the person comes and says, oh, it's great to see you, David. I'm sorry.
And then they're shocked.
I hope you learned something. I'm never going to be mean to you, because we're all learning. We all have our own prejudices, right? It comes out in different ways. Nobody's perfect. And I think it's in each of our own ways, I guess, to push that boundary and help people deal with their prejudices in the same way. Hopefully, we're also learning about our own prejudices and learning from them.
Yeah, which is the theme of this summit, Leadership Across Boundaries. This is kind of the most internal sense of that. Is it's not cultural or country boundaries, but it's actually you and yourself and your identity, and allowing that to expand into other people's as well.
And it's kind of related to what you were saying, whether like the identity, and if somebody you're discriminated against so much, you internalize what you really are not, or you internalize what other people think you are. How do you remain who you are in this relationship with others, but you don't internalize that and have that become you?
I mean, having said that, I think it's important that that you are cognizant of it, and you are very critical of systems that reinforce any kind of sort of discrimination or any kind of sort of profiling, and that, I mean, that's a very important distinction to be made, but just not to let it get to your head to the point that it becomes you. I think that's a very important thing, in a leadership sort of, framework, is that you kind of lead with your own sort of self and ideas and sort of vision for the world and for yourself, but also challenge boundaries and distinctions that have sort of been placed for you to navigate.
Absolutely.
I think you were sharing this theory at lunch earlier. This idea that you're not just trying to break the rules because you can, because you want to be the individual who breaks the rules, right? But you as an individual, like you said, right, you're not embodying something just because you want to be it, but that it's your core value, it's you're true to yourself and you're learning from that experience.
Absolutely. And you know, what's interesting to me, listening to you all speak, something you keep reinforcing throughout this in both clear and subtle ways, is that although you've been distinguished as leaders and called leaders and brought here as leaders in your field, you don't self-identify necessarily as a leader. You don't wake up every day thinking, I'm a leader and I'm going to go out today and be a leader. And I think that oftentimes it can be a tricky thing to talk about leadership when there's so many different forms of it. And it doesn't always look a specific way, as we started out talking about. So when you're getting to that point, like David was saying, of just knowing who you are, and that kind of being the most important thing. Doesn't matter if you're going to call yourself a leader or not call yourself a leader, but knowing who you are. What are some of the practices that you found are helpful to get you to a place, including things that maybe you choose not to do?
One of the things that I can say easily is that I always make sure that I take in feedback that I get. I had an experience a couple of years ago when I first started working in the family business, and I was in a meeting, and I'm fortunate to be one of these people that doesn't have an anger management problem. But I can get annoyed sometimes, and that annoyance shows. And I was in a meeting, and I became annoyed. And I said something like, this is just ridiculous. I'm sorry, can we just end the meeting? And obviously, it was obvious that I wasn't in my right state of mind, and that I was just getting really annoyed by everything that was happening in the room. And I left, and then my boss at the time came and said to me, you know, what's going on? We've noticed in the last few days or something that you haven't been yourself. And I think he was exaggerating a bit. I think he just wanted to find an easy way to have this conversation with me. And I realized that actually that is just not me. It's not me to have that outburst. And especially when I realized that I will be in this job 8 hours at least every day, every single day. And what wasn't me, if I keep at it, can become me. And it can become me outside the space as well. And so I took it upon myself to take what he said critically and really learn from it. And I just made a decision that I won't let work annoy me in that way. I won't let anyone at the office annoy me in that way, because that's just going to stand in my way.
And it's not you.
And it's not me. And then a month later, when I had first gone to, a month later when I was at the ILO in Geneva for the youth unemployment panel, where I was representing international employers, and we were doing a negotiation between workers and employers and government on a text that would address the unemployment crisis, and I was supposed to be leading the negotiations. I realized that staying calm and cool and collected is part of the negotiation process. And I could watch the guy on the opposing side from the workers getting annoyed and getting angry and using profanity to get his message across. And I used that as a position of strength, that my calmness, my collected personality was what was ending up winning us the negotiation. And a lot of the time, because the chairperson of the organization who was overseeing the negotiation process could see that I was, respectful, and that I was getting my point across not through anger or through negative energy, but through logic. And since then, I've just embodied it. So what you said is something, I don't know. It's a difficult question that you're asking us. But one thing for sure is that I will take criticism and feedback as I go along. And I think that leaders that acknowledge that they're not perfect are the ones that will be most effective. Because if you put on a facade to say, look, I'm a leader, and therefore I look like I know it all, even if I don't feel that I do, then you don't end up learning.
Right. And what I want to distinguish here is that, just before this conversation, we were saying, I don't let other people define me. But there's a difference between that. It is different between letting someone define you and taking critical feedback from somebody. Those are two different things, and I think they're two different
At the end of the day, they're still both within you, right? The idea is that you need to be open, and you need to decide what will define you and what will not define you.
Yeah.
Because we are social beings, like you said, and all of our interactions are social. Whether we work in a lab for the development of human good, or whether you work with people for their own development directly, this is all a human game at the end.
Absolutely. Human
So
connection.
you can't stay isolated.
Sure thing.
Or you can, but it's not a good idea.
Yeah.
I'm actually not sure how to answer that because I mean, you're asking whether there are aspects of leadership that we don't find within ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Or we
well,
grapple with.
Yeah, that you grapple with, or I guess just practices, things that you would, whether it is just sitting quiet and listening and having silence, or whether it's being able to take critical feedback, something that you practice consciously to try to make sure that you're defining yourself and you're being yourself.
I mean, it's a lot of things because, I don't know, I can't speak for everybody, but I think it's, you question yourself every day and you question sort of your practices every day. And I feel like that's something that, is a very important thing if you want to lead in any shape, way, or form. While not letting that sort of trip you up. You have to know when to kind of just get on with the show. I think for me, I've always traditionally been sort of a lot more jump in head first and very decisive about certain things, and that has, I think I've, within sort of the span of working in academia, or throughout my academic sort of journey, I've learned to kind of step back and to sort of examine and to consider different sort of aspects of a situation, and not to jump too fast into certain decisions, into certain judgments without really having a sort of a long-term plan of where you're going to end up. So that's become I'm still kind of, working with it because I really just want to do, but.
But a practice of patience. I think that's beautiful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
David, do you have anything?
I can't point on any one particular thing.
Okay. Lifestyle, general.
I think what I do is that I always share every document I have and get 1 million feedback from 1,000,001 people. Like I always share my work. In the roughest, I do due diligence, write it to the best I could, edit it, and share it, and just let it go out there in the world and let the world come back with ideas.
So similar to what Noura is saying as well, but also going back to your original point about humility too, and just having a practice of humility and knowing that you're doing your best, but you might not always be right all the time, and getting feedback. I want to make sure that we have time for Q&A as well, and maybe just to conclude the panel, I want to thank you all for bringing to light some of these ideas of how we have leadership across boundaries, how we're just human beings across boundaries, even if we don't call ourselves leaders. And I think a lot of what you said is just about human relationships, how to cultivate those, how to manage those, how to honor those, and especially in an increasingly digital and technological world that can sometimes be harder and harder to get. So thank you for sharing your thoughts, sharing your wisdom.
I wanted to know, thank you all for coming. This is very interesting. I thought I was coming to hear about leadership across boundaries, it was about the United Nations or something. This has been very interesting. I wonder if you think that leadership is sometimes not apparent or rewarded. Could be someone who comes up with an idea that you did not have or had never been articulated before, and that person is not necessarily recognized, but they end up really, really changing things. And so I could, articulate myself a lot of different experiences I've had, or historical examples as well. But In the work that you do you leave the people that you work with open? Are they able to express their ideas so that maybe they can solve a problem that you had not come up with a solution for yet?
So I was reading this entity, great question by the way, I was reading this piece or watching this talk where the person was saying that the leader, the person who starts it, is not the most important person, but actually it's the first follower. The leader is just a crazy individual who's doing something. Until you get the first follower, that's when it becomes something. Until you get a couple more followers, then it becomes a movement, right? So the first leader is never recognized, or almost never recognized by our society, but they actually do play very important roles in having an initiative catch fire. To be honest, right? So I stay at lab very late every day because I enjoy it. I wake up early, go to lab, and I stay there. And there's always this gentleman comes, he's a cleaner, I don't know where he's from, but I've spoken to him, he's foreign. He comes in every day, knocks on my office door, goes into my office, says hi, I have my headphones on, I'm designing stuff, takes out the trash, puts it in his container, walks away every day. What he does is leadership that allows me to do my work. I don't have to think about that work, but he's out there. Nobody notices him. Nobody gives him the credit for the work that he does. The people who enable us to do the work that we do we don't generally see them. They disappear because we don't have to do that work. I think those are leaders that are never recognized. They don't have the ideas that we think we have and that we have generally, which is good, but they play such a significant role in helping us and in creating environments for our ideas, for other people's ideas to flourish. And I think for me, to answer your question, I think the people who need a lot more recognition are often the people who dissolve in the walls, who we don't see, whose roles actually enable us to do the work that we do.
I'd like to pick up on what David said, because when you asked your question, my first thought was also office helpers and cleaners. I'm in a position right now where my role as head of human resources allows me to, or forces me, where I'm actually expected to think about all the employees of a company. And in our aggregate, Nesma has 20,000 employees across more than one geography in Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Turkey, and the UAE. And so what I think about as in human resources is how can we recognize those individuals and actually give them more space to be recognized and to assert more control. And I think that because I'm thinking about it with regards to an actual organization with a hierarchy, our challenge today is to get our leaders, the actual formal leaders, to think along those lines, to think about how they can recognize any person in the organization and how they can create an open and safe space for people who are maybe vulnerable because they don't speak the dominant language of that culture, or because they're not really paid significantly compared to the others, how to create a space for them to actually inform us. And we always, at Nesma, we are aware of that because that's just maybe our culture or our style. And we are aware of the strength of the informal organization that exists among cleaners and drivers. And actually, we have a lot of stories where a driver will have found out about a government bid because of the nature of because maybe he's friends with the minister's driver. And when you allow them to express their opinions and you don't create a hostile or scary environment, you end up benefiting as well. And they also end up sharing their voice. So for me, I would say that, yes, it's one thing to recognize it at an individual level, but for me, thinking about an institution, my challenge is to make that institution also recognize the power of being inclusive.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, I work in a less traditional, structure or environment, so it's really just me for the most part, except for, when I did work in traditional television. And in that sense, the great thing about content creation and sort of creative production is that at the end of the day, a lot of ownership is given to the person creating the content. And for me, it was very, very important when I was doing that to allow people sort of the environment or the space to really, develop their own sort of creative vision in the way that and create content in the way that they saw fit. So it was really important for me to encourage that and to have sort of a space in which there is a real sort of sense of creative control on people's projects. I think from the general sort of, from the editorial side, so whenever I write or share or even like certain ideas that I speak about are such that I hope that I will never be able to answer that question, because you put thoughts out there and ideas out there that perhaps seed a certain possibility that maybe somebody else will draw upon and be able to sort of grow from that. And I actually take more pleasure in shedding light on those stories and in sharing them and acknowledging them when I can. So.
Yeah, and also just say, so we were chatting a little bit earlier about this in the day, and what we were talking about is we think there actually is a shift happening in the way that the world thinks about leadership, and that shift is happening towards the idea of recognizing everyone and everyone having their own leadership capacity. And it certainly comes through in social media, the idea that everybody literally has a voice and can share. The work that David's doing in Sierra Leone and Kenya and South Africa is, it's not about what kind of service can I do to this community to help them. It's what can everybody in this community do, and how can I just create a situation where they can do the best for themselves, and very similar to the training camp that Noura's involved with. So I think that shift is happening, and I think these are 3 amazing examples of leadership that's making it happen.
So something that interested me in watching this and listening to this is how reluctant you are to consider yourselves leaders. And so I'd like to ask you to reflect to us what it is that holds you back from using that title on yourself.
You're like,
I think it's extra weight. I want to be free and be crazy. I wanna explore and start stuff and fail and not have to worry about some name tag on me. I want to keep learning. That's confusing, because as the leader, you should be able to be learning as well, right? You're learning a lot on your work, so you're great leaders. But generally, the image of a leader is somebody who knows it, somebody who's like charging the battalion. The song, follow the leader, you follow the leader. I don't want to be following the leader. I don't want to be the leader who everybody follows. For me, so there's this kid who is my friend. He's from Sierra Leone. He's an amputee, and he knows that I develop prosthesis, and he comes to me and goes, "Look, David, I see you do this stuff. You should create a prosthetic for me. My socket is uncomfortable." And I said, actually, I don't have to create anything for you. I'm doing this because I'm learning from it, because I think it's an important problem to solve in the world, because it has value in Sierra Leone, it has value in India and the US, everybody can use it. But I'm not doing it for you, per se, as an individual. And you do have the agency to do it for yourself. You could do it for yourself. And I think quite often when we ascertain our leadership position, generally it means that we have other people depend on us to do stuff. For me, I don't want anybody depending on me to do stuff. I want to do what I want to do.
I mean, I'll say I completely agree with our 3 panelists as well, in a reluctance to call myself a leader, but for me it's more of an idea of the positioning that seems to happen when you use that term. And traditionally it's that there's a leader, and then there's followers. And I prefer to think of myself as someone surrounded by lots of people, and I love being surrounded by and connected to lots of people. And David alluded to this earlier, but sometimes someone else is an expert on something. Maybe sometimes I have some expertise, but we all share that. Whatever project I'm working on, whatever initiative I'm involved with, it is whatever we're offering out to the world is the culmination of a lot of effort coming together. Everyone plays an important role in that, so I never want to distinguish myself in a way that then either diminishes someone else's contribution or puts out an unrealistic sense of my contribution to it. So that's the reluctance where that comes from for me.
For me, it's the opposite of David, actually. I'm motivated by the people who ask me to help them to solve their challenges, because maybe my style is that I will sit them down and say, okay, help me brainstorm. What is it that you need, and how can I activate my resources and my networks to get you what you need? And you will have your part, I will have my part, and then we will succeed in this together. I think just my reluctance about being called a leader or calling myself a leader is my same reluctance against being called an expert or any of these terms that are out there, because well, first of all, because there's so much more to do. And I think when someone is called a leader, or I call myself a leader, it's like as if you achieved it and you're done. And now you're in a place when you're preaching to others or telling them about how they can become leaders. And I think that, for me, is uncomfortable. If someone comes into me and tells me, oh, you're a leader and you motivated me or whatever, then I'm not going to say no, I'll say thank you. The way that if someone tells you I like your outfit, I will say thank you. I won't say, oh no, I'm not, So I think I don't have an issue with the feedback that I get. I think it's just about, I just don't think that it's necessary, because it's not what drives me. I'm driven by happiness. So actually, that's what I'm driven by. And I realize that my personal happiness comes from achievement and from doing what I love, and from actually learning from my experiences and building on them and connecting with other people. But I just don't think that terms are very important.
I mean, I work in the media industry, so it's like there's enough of an ego sort of based environment to go around. So I'm okay not having a title get to my head. And that's something that I feel is important, not to let, we're in the Middle East. I mean, look around you. The political climate is filled with examples of how people let power get to their heads and hampers their actual role and what they're supposed to do. So for me, I'd rather not have the onus of that entire sort of leadership of whatever, leadership of Arab women representation, or leadership of the media industry, or leadership of whatever that is sort of is bestowed upon you, and just continue to sort of have a curiosity and a desire to grow.
Yeah.
First question to David, since he is from Sierra Leone. What did you do in Sierra Leone? I think I'm familiar with Sierra Leone. I mean, they have the most corrupted government there, and very poor country. And I'm sure you watched that film about Sierra Leone. What did you do there then, since you are a leader? Can you tell us something about your experience there? Wait, not finished. The lady there. How do you see yourself as a leadership with CSR? You said this is part of your job.
Yes.
But you didn't mention about it. And is leadership something we can plant? Something we can put seeds, for example, to create some leadership people? What can we do in order to create these, let's say, kind of leadership? We have many leaders in history who led their countries to catastrophes and many things, but I hope to, from David, to answer me first.
So, I was writing the talk on the plane here, and I often like to start by joking in the talk, and the talk draft starts by saying, I'm from Sierra Leone, but unfortunately I don't have any blood diamonds with me, or I wasn't a child soldier when I was growing up. So it's a joke, but it's kind of a little serious. And I shared it with my friends, and my friend was like, this is not really that funny. So I think, to your point, I think there's huge corruption in Sierra Leone. It's also a very beautiful country. It's also a very wonderful place where you can literally just have fun and relax. So I tend to define it by the beauty that I want to see, but not avoiding the fact that it is corrupt and not avoiding the fact that we have had problems and we have challenges. What I do is I try to I try to have the young people realize that they have an agency for change. I try to have myself understand that the best I can do is to create value for society, create value for myself and create value for society, and hopefully be an influence for other young people. Hopefully be an influence for older people who will understand that you don't have to be a certain person. I don't need a specific set of degrees before I can do work. I started doing malaria work from when I was a freshman in college. That was a program that the National Malaria Control Program couldn't do, because I dared to say I can do full coverage in a community with my friends from Global Minimum, and say we can cover every sleeping space, and say it doesn't matter who the individual is, but everybody had to be under a mosquito net. The government was too large, maybe they couldn't do it. But I wasn't going to stop at what people allowed me to do. So as an individual, and with the people that I associate myself with, I look at the beauty within the country and say, look, I want to create value for myself. I don't have a child yet, but growing up, my desire was to make sure that my own child, when I have my child, does not have the same childhood that I had and went through the war that I went through and has to deal with corrupt leaders that currently rule the country. It comes back into realization for what you want for yourself and what you want for your community. It is not okay that there is corruption. It is not okay that we still rely on aid to run most of our countries. It is wonderful that we can get external help. But at some point, the decision to grow, the decision for any community anywhere where there is corruption, where there is some dependency, to grow has to come from citizens. I believe that inventiveness, I believe that creativity and the opportunity to learn by hands-on doing is what we need, is what can transform us wherever we are, and that no position is permanent, and that we have the agency and self-efficacy, and we do have the resources available to us to make that change. That's what I do when I'm there. I do not solve, part of why I don't like to be called a leader, why I don't solve other people's problems for them, is if you solve somebody's problem for them, they come back the next day and say, okay, now you trained me, where's the job? Come give me a job. And then you give them a job, and then they say, yeah, you gave me a job, but the salary is not good enough. Can you increase the salary? And then there's always more. And how do you stop that? I don't know. This is what I'm exploring with the set of solutions that I'm working on. And if you have ideas of how to stop that, I would love to talk to you about it, because I don't know.
Well, I just want to jump in quickly, too. So what David's essentially doing is he's changing a thought process of a generation, which is something very valuable to do, not just in Sierra Leone, but in any country in the world. We have plenty of corruption that happens in America as well. And I'm someone who does public health work and foreign aid work, and I'm usually the foreigner in another country. And I just wanted to point out that I think there's something remarkable and powerful about going home to your own country and doing work. And I think that there's something unique that David offers to young people in Sierra Leone that I never could offer to young people in Sierra Leone, because he is from that country. And I think that is particularly powerful in changing the way that things are going to work in the future, and the way this generation grows up, believes in themselves differently, and therefore behaves differently once they're in positions of power.
You asked me about the CSR programs that we run in our company. The definition of social responsibility begins with the company's own internal practices. And Nesma is a diversified holding company that operates in marine and transportation services, in contracting, in telecom and technology, in the airline industry. We're quite diversified. And what this begins with, the CSR, or the social responsibility, begins with ensuring that in all of our companies, we do not take on any projects that we cannot complete with quality. It begins with ensuring that in all of our projects, we hire locally. It begins with ensuring that whatever we can do to minimize the effect of our projects, we do. Obviously, there is an industry that we're in and a best practice that currently exists. So I'm not satisfied with the level of, for example, environmental record that we have as a company. We can always do more. We don't have to wait for what's in the local regulations. But I can say with certainty that in terms of our own approach as Nesma to local employment, we are above and beyond government expectations. And we have amazing stories of going into local villages in areas surrounding our project. So for example, we currently operate the King Abdullah port in King Abdullah Economic City, which is north of Jeddah. And we went into the villages around Cake, and we met with women and men from there, and we hired them and gave them all the training that they needed in order to take these jobs. And obviously, in the long run, that's a lot more sustainable and a lot more profitable for us. So that makes business sense as well. Other than that, in general, in Saudi Arabia, and I'm sure in other places in the world, the private sector plays a very important role in social and economic development. And we run some programs, including the training center that I spoke of, which is a CSR project. It's not a core business of ours. And in my role as human resources, I also oversee our social responsibility projects because our platform for CSR is on human development and training. And so it's a great place to be able to innovate a project for our own companies and then also roll it out to the public. And vice versa, when we find a program from the public, we can then take it in and use it with our employees. So that's, in a nutshell, what we do in social responsibility. I'd be happy to give you more information about these projects if there's more interest to learn more.
I mean, you asked if it's possible to create leaders. It depends on the kind of leader you're talking about. If it's a question of organizational leaders, then, I mean, there is an infinite amount of literature out there on different theories on organizational leadership. But I think the type of leadership that we've been talking about here today and the type of leadership that I've seen sort of by spending all of yesterday with some of the most remarkable students I've met is, I think, definitely something that can be taught. And there are seeds of sort of simple things like instilling a sense of curiosity, instilling a sense of being able to redefine this idea of leadership and allowing everybody to think of themselves as a leader. If you are taught to think of yourself as a follower or as a recipient and a reactor, then that does not create a culture that invites people to think of themselves as leaders and proactive and owners of their situation and their condition. And emphasizing the idea that hard work will eventually, get you there. I think that's something that is one of the most valuable lessons I learned very early on when I started working, is that not to get caught up in the idea of you being a leader or you eventually becoming a leader and all the pomp and the circumstance associated with it, and actually just doing the work and going through the motions of whatever it is that you're doing will actually get you to that leadership position where other people will see you as leaders and you'll stop seeing yourself in that way.